We are Rogue Media Sports.
Vanguard is working hard to balance opportunity and risk for investors in this time of volatile yields. We know financial advisors are working hard to do the same. Visit Vanguard.com/fixed income today. Important information. All investing is subject to risk, including the possible loss of the money you invest. Bond funds are subject to the risk that an issuer will fail to make payments on time, and that bond prices will decline because of rising interest rates or negative perceptions of an issuer's ability to make payments. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. With the Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card, you can earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases you want and purchases you need. That means you earn on what you want, like trying out that new workout class, and 2% cash rewards on what you need, like a foam roller for your sore muscles. That's the beauty of the Active Cash Credit Card. It's ready when you are, with unlimited 2% cash rewards. The Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card. That's real life ready. Terms apply. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/activecash.
It is the Doomsday podcast, and following the Cowboys' 42-10 loss, and Ed Werder standing by. He's been out in Santa Clara, and Ed's been there for a good while today, and was out there in the wee hours doing some live shots. Ed, this is a weird one. When we taped last week, we kind of didn't know what was going on with one of our buddies who's produced this for us since pretty much since the beginning, the Doomsday podcast, and that's Mark Friedman. And we had our kind of worst fears confirmed after we finished taping last week that Mark had passed away. And for people that don't really know, he didn't come on with us very often, but we always talked about him. And anyway, Ed, I just wanted to give you an opportunity, say a couple of words about Frito. He's a fun guy. He loved you. He loved radio. He loved podcasting. And I'm still kind of getting my arms around it. We're going to celebrate his life on Thursday, but it really kind of, unfortunately we have a guy like Steven that can step in and help us, but it's just, cast a shadow on kind of everything we've done this week. And it's been a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah, we're definitely doing this first show without him with a heavy heart. I really don't know how we start other than we do our usual 10 minutes and then you say, Frito, play the music. And that's sort of one of the highlights of the whole show. You never knew exactly what opinions Frito was going to share with you when you came to the studio. Politically, you had a pretty good sense of where he was going to come from. But yeah, he was just, such a great, engaging guy, and, so much respect for him in our business, especially in the Dallas area. And so much personal regard I had for him. I've been around some people who have endured serious medical circumstances, and you're one of them. And been able to, endure it and come out the other side. And what he went through 3 years ago nearly took his life, and probably should have. And for him to rise above that and come out of it and just be just as happy and easygoing and engaging and gentle and as friendly a guy as he was, is something that'll always stay with me. So, yeah, that first night after we did the podcast and went to bed, and I found out from you when I got home that he had been found and had died. I couldn't sleep all night. I just kept waking up thinking that it was so surreal to me that someone like him could be gone so quickly. So I don't really know what else to say, and hopefully can put it into better words on Thursday, should that be necessary.
Yeah, well, we'll and we think Joel is his twin brother, and Kellen is his sister-in-law, Joel's wife, who he had such a close relationship, and his nephews and nieces, and he just great guy. And I think maybe I should just say it one last time because people are so used to it, and we love doing it. And it almost became a joking thing, like I was bossing him around or something. But Frito, please play the music. All right, and Ed, let's get back to the what we do each week, and that is break down these Cowboys games. And tonight, I mean, there you are in Santa Clara, probably excited about like what we all were. Okay, this is going to be a measuring stick. How are the Cowboys perform? I certainly think we all knew they could lose the game, but to basically never really be competitive in the game. I mean, maybe somebody wants to make the argument that when they got it to 21-10, that meant something. But the 49ers quickly answered. Ed, I've seen a lot of Cowboys games. You've seen a ton of them going back. But with what we were kind of thinking we were going to see and wondering if the Cowboys measured up against what we think is one of the best teams in the NFC, this is about as poor a performance under the circumstances that I've ever seen the Cowboys have. And it sort of has left me questioning the head coach, the quarterback, the defensive coordinator. Like, I don't know if there's anybody I'm not questioning right now.
Well, I'll just say that to provide context from on site, before the game, I spent a half an hour with Jerry Jones while the players were warming up. And we were standing in the corner of the end zone, and he told me that this was almost to him like week one, because he didn't know what his team was capable of yet, because they really hadn't played a great team. And he thought the 49ers, as he said on the radio during the week, he thought the 49ers right now are the team everybody would pick to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Excuse me. And so he felt like they had really not had an opportunity to show, all the changes they had made and realize the benefits of them from the last time they were out here in San Francisco when the 49ers ended their season. That now Mike McCarthy was calling the plays. They had added Brandon Cooks. They had more speed. Kevontae Turpin had a role on offense. Tony Pollard, playmaker, going to get all the snaps at running back. And I think Jerry anticipated that the offense was going to do something and look capable of winning games like this. And now what happened doesn't suggest that the Cowboys won't be in the playoffs. It's going to be a lot harder to win their division now, because now they've lost to the 49ers, who are one of the unbeaten teams. The other unbeaten teams in their division, so they're 2 games behind the Eagles before they even play them. But that's really not the objective. The objective of the Cowboys going into the season was not, we're going to make the playoffs. I mean, they've won 12 games 2 years in a row. And I think we can't ignore the emphasis the Cowboys themselves placed on this game, from the head coach to the starting quarterback, throughout the roster and the locker room all week long. And you don't do that unless you truly believe you're capable of winning, or going to at least appear capable of winning. And the Cowboys appeared neither of those things tonight in this game. This is the worst loss that Mike McCarthy has had as a Cowboys head coach. 32 points. He lost the game in Green Bay by 35, or this is the second worst loss in his 17-year NFL head coaching career. And it's the worst loss the Cowboys have ever suffered in this rivalry. And that was not at all expected by the owner and general manager, standing down there looking forward to seeing his team compete at its highest level, and, unveil all of these things that McCarthy and Dak were withholding because they didn't have their starting offensive line, but they did tonight. Or they were playing, opponents that they were blowing out. The defense blew them out before the offense could do anything to take over the game themselves. And none of that was there. We haven't seen a good offensive performance out of this team yet. We're 5 games into the season. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think I've always believed Dak was capable. I know there's been a strong feeling about his leadership and his ability in the locker room. But is that damaged in a game like this, coming after the last time he was out here and played like they did? I don't know. I mean, if we're still asking if he's capable in his 8th season, maybe we have our answer.
Yeah. He just turned 30. Brock Purdy is now in his 2nd season, Mr. Irrelevant. picked last in the draft. And the more we say that, Ed, the more it reminds me of what we always said about Tom Brady. I mean, again, I'm not saying he's going to be Tom Brady, but he is in a great offense. He's got a great coach. I mean, he throws a beautiful ball. And I think the guys on the broadcast, Ed, and you were there at the scene, made the right points, which was any thought that, oh, well, he just has this great coach. And maybe last year they did scheme it up and make it easy for him in some respect. He does have great weapons, but he's throwing the ball down the field. He's working the ball. He's not just like, this is not the Texas coast. This is not the West Coast or whatever the Cowboys are trying to do. He is working the ball. And at times, he would throw it into tight spots if the Cowboys could cover. He would, but he throws guys open. He hit Kittle for 3 touchdowns. I mean, even those passes, Ed, I'm sure that got your attention too, to a fullback where they literally threw a slant, like on like an RPO type deal. He just kind of sidearms a slant right and just puts it right on the fullback. Like this is not just, to me, some kind of caretaker, whatever we used to say, bus driver type quarterback. This guy can play. And here's Dak, and every time we ask the same question, well, shouldn't Dak have a advantage over Garoppolo? Shouldn't he have an advantage over Purdy? And I know there are a lot of other factors, but he never does. He never. I mean, like last year he was horrible against San Francisco. In this game he was horrible. And what was the one thing we were saying for Dak this year? Oh, he's only thrown 1 interception. Oh, they're getting the ball out quicker. All these little stats we're talking about. Throws 3. Yeah.
Well, a couple things. I had a chance to talk to Kyle Shanahan last night before the game, and one of the things that he mentioned was you could get a real sense that he felt really challenged in terms of making sure that he protected Brock Purdy against this defense, because he recognized that they're built to, play from ahead, rush the quarterback, create havoc and turnovers. And he wanted to make sure that he could protect his quarterback from all that. He said, the most frightening thing to see is Micah Parsons lined up over your center, rushing the quarterback. And if we don't have the right play on, that's a scary thing. I don't think Micah Parsons once rushed through the A-gap tonight. And he also talked about the changes that Dallas had made offensively and how much it now resembled what the 49ers were doing, because he's a product of the West Coast offense, his dad, Mike Shanahan. And so to some degree, they're running the same systems with some variations. And he made the point that when you're running the football like the Cowboys are running the football, committed to running the football, when you're moving the quarterback, when you're getting it out fast, taking little risk, you're doing it to make sure your quarterback doesn't throw the game away. And yet here we have 3 interceptions by Dak Prescott and 4 touchdown passes by Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy still hasn't thrown an interception this year. He's gone longer than Steve Young or Joe Montana. And they're both Hall of Famers and Super Bowl winners. So the 49ers by no means expected this at all by the Cowboys. They were well prepared. They thought this was going to be a tough, hard-fought game like last year's was out here. Shanahan told me, he said that was one of the hardest, most physical games I'd ever been involved in. And he really challenged his offense to step up in this game and not rely on the defense, because he thought, hey, we're not going to get the turnover. They're not turning it over on offense like they did last year. We can't count on that. We have to perform and execute on offense. And what happens, I mean, it's a blowout, and it's a blowout so early that Nick Bosa, after the game, said the most surprising thing to him was the starting defensive line was taken out of the game with 5 minutes left in the third quarter. I mean, Fred Warner dominated this game. They had 4 takeaways, and he had, a forced fumble on Tony Pollard, who's only fumbled once in his entire career. He had, one of the picks of Dak. He had a sack on a early third down when it still mattered. I mean, the Cowboys had their 5 best offensive linemen starting in their preferred positions for the first time since they drafted Tyler Smith last year. Made a big deal about that. Thought they could win on the outside with the receivers and protect with those guys and make some big plays, and it just never happened. Made one big play with Kevontae Turpin.
Yeah. And the rest of them in the first half, Ed, what, 5 3-and-outs? I mean, it wasn't like in it was almost like Mike was offended. Somebody, I think David Moore, tried to bring up the Arizona game, and he was like, "This was nothing like the Arizona game. We moved the ball up and down the field. We just couldn't score against them." And Mike admitted today we couldn't move it at all. And it was like 3-and-out over and over again. And then they hit one play, I think, to set that field goal up. But I mean, Ed, there was nothing more emblematic in how inept they were, like the lack of trust McCarthy had in Dak, or just maybe it wasn't just Dak, just the offense. It's 3rd and 11. They have 2 timeouts or 30 seconds left. At one point they were on that drive trying to go down there and make it, at least 21-10 before the half, and they just shut it down. And they were like, let's just get to the half, and they let the last 30 seconds just tick off, and they walked off the field. That there were some moments, and again, there were moments I kind of thought back to when Wade got fired in that they were infamous in Green Bay, and they were getting killed like 44
a primetime
to 7.
Game.
Yeah.
Prime time. Mike Jenkins turned down a tackle
to
prevent a touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell you, the moments in this one, first of all, I started to kind of think the offense wasn't even really playing that hard. But like, there was one play when Mason is at their other back, number 24. There was one back or one touchdown, literally, where it's just like nobody did anything. Like they handed it to him, and he just raced in, and I even think he was kind of surprised. Like, is nobody going to touch me? Like nobody even came. And so I kind of, and again, were people banged up? Yes. There's several people hurt by the end of the game, but I also feel like they kind of checked out on that game, and that is very concerning.
Well, I mean, the play that signaled surrender to me was when Dak threw the interception deep down the field, trying to get Brandon Cooks, who had no chance to make a play on the ball, and it was intercepted by Tayshaun Gibson, the safety for the 49ers. And then he threw another interception, and on the next play, maybe the play you're talking about, the 49ers scored. So in 6 seconds and 2 plays, they threw an interception and gave up a touchdown. And yeah, I think they introduced the question of quitting into the equation for sure late in the game. And I didn't go into the Cowboys locker room because I wound up covering the 49ers post game for the most part. But to see some of the things that were said, Dak Prescott, a year ago saying he lost the game here. He was the reason they lost. He has to play better. Simple as that. Saying this week that, again, acknowledging his own failure by saying, I didn't play close to my best in either of those games, and then coming out and playing maybe worse than either of those 2 games, and then saying this was one of the most humbling games he's ever been a part of. And McCarthy saying that he's not a burn the tape kind of guy, but everybody's got to take ownership of their part in this loss. I think they're in a much different place going home from San Francisco than they ever imagined they would be. And, they've got an extra day before they play next week on primetime Monday Night Football on ESPN against, Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier, the Dak's former coaches who are now with the Chargers. And the Chargers are capable of putting a lot of points on the board. So, yeah, I don't think the 49ers thought this was possible, and I don't think the Cowboys ever saw it coming.
Yeah, and the fans and everybody are just up in arms, and I understand that this evening. I did want to bring up our presenting sponsor, Marable Homes. Ed, they continue to knock it out of the park. I saw another lot the other day, and it's kind of fun to see the empty lot with the Marable Homes sign, and then kind of you start thinking, okay, what's this going to look like? And then piece by piece it goes up, and they are just gorgeous. And you're seeing them in Lake Highlands, you're seeing them in Preston Hollow, you're now seeing them at Cedar Creek Lake. They're now starting to specialize in some of these lake homes for people like you, Ed, that kind of need a second place to go hang your hat. And they do just a gorgeous job, Blake and Amy Marable. and Marable. That's Marable. And we
think they could could they do a tear down and a rebuild at the Star? That might be necessary.
Yeah. Well, their houses are built on good foundation, unlike this group. But we appreciate Marable Homes, and we'll be continuing to talk about them and love what they do and love their association with the Doomsday podcast, even in one of the Cowboys' worst losses in years, 42-10 at I'm trying to think who the Cowboys have done things like this to. I guess recently, like the Jets, and I mean, there have been a few others over the years.
The Giants, the Jets, yeah. the Patriots. I mean, they just gave Bill Belichick his worst loss, and the next week Mike McCarthy turns around and takes his worst loss as a Cowboy coach.
Yeah,
I mean, they give up 42 points. That's more than they had given up in their first 4 games combined. They've given up 41 points in their previous games. They're the first team since the 1990 Raiders to allow more points in their 5th game than they allowed in their first 4 games combined. That's the kind of disaster. And then you look at the series. Well, the Cowboys have gone from, in the 3 games we're talking about, they've gone from scoring 17 points to 12 points, now to 10 points against the 49ers. I mean, this was all about establishing your ability to go out and beat this team in case you played them again in the postseason. Well, if they make the postseason, which I think they will, but now they're probably not going to win the division. How are they going to feel when they play the 49ers again? They have to hope to God somebody else eliminates them first.
But by the way, Ed, I thought it was kind of funny that Melissa Stark, like the NBC, started their telecast with a whole Trey Lance thing. And I was just like, okay, I mean, I kind of get it, but I don't know if that's the story here. And then by the late in the game, when it got out of hand, like everybody on Twitter was demanding that Trey Lance get into this game.
Because Cooper Rush finished, but Lance was a designated third quarterback, could only play if the other 2 were physically injured and incapable. I'm not going to say that the other 2 were incapable, because they might have both been incapable tonight, but physically injured and incapable. Yeah, I mean, that would have been remarkable. But hey, who knows where this is all going? I mean, the Cowboys have been at their best. They've been the best team in football coming off a loss. They're 9-1, and they've averaged 33 points a game coming off a loss, as they will be next week going into the Charger game. They're the best. That's the highest winning percentage and the highest points per game average in that situation in the entire league. So in all likelihood, they will come back from this and they will win against the Chargers. But I mean, Mike McCarthy's in year, 4 of a 5-year contract. He's now taking more responsibility because he's calling the plays. And if the offense is going to play like this all year, I'm not sure that's going to be anything to brag about. And then, I mean, you laugh about Trey Lance, but he changes the equation in the Cowboys deciding how to move forward with Dak Prescott. He's something different in that equation that had not previously existed. A potential young replacement quarterback, drafted 3rd overall. 49ers gave up 3 first-round picks to acquire him. The Cowboys gave up a pick to get him from the 49ers. I mean, who knows? Wouldn't be the craziest thing that's ever happened.
Well, I think they're going to circle the wagons, and we'll hear this week how much they love Dak, and this isn't Dak's fault somehow. Yet, as you said, that for the first time ever, these 5 offensive linemen played together. That was supposed to mean something because, of course, in the loss recently against Arizona, they were missing 3 starters. They put all 5 together. Now, you're going to love this. We didn't have Stretch last week because of some other circumstances, but Glenn Stretch Smith hands out some grades, and Ed, they've never been quite this harsh, and he's pretty aggressive. It is now time for Stretch Plays with former Cowboys coach and scout Glenn Stretch Smith. It is time for Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys scout and coach. And Ed and I have already talked about it a little bit, Stretch. Tough night for the Cowboys, but, man, tough night for our podcast because we lost Frito. It happened unexpectedly and suddenly last week. Our longtime producer and Stretch, I know, we all knew him through 103.3 FM ESPN in Dallas, and I was just going to give you a quick chance to say a word or two about Frito.
Yeah, I mean, you hate to lose somebody like that, and we never know when God calls our number, and you have to think that he must have been looking for a heck of a producer, and I mean, really all I can say is, I hope that Frito can rest in peace. He's a really good guy. He's a good man, and certainly, we'll miss him, and I hope he, like I said, I hope he's in a better place. We know that he was tormented and went through a lot of different things, and just hope that he's in a better place. And you know what? We got us a heck of a producer now helping us out, Stephen Simcox, and I'm glad that you always like to have a guy behind a guy. And
yeah,
we work with Stephen at ESPN down in ESPN Central Texas, and he'll do a great job. But there's no question we miss Frito, and obviously, we'll miss him for a while. It's part of life, and like I said, the Lord must have needed a good producer, and he got one.
All right. Tonight, the Cowboys have just a historic loss, and I know, Stretch, I just saw you on WFAA, and I want to get your thoughts on Dak because I thought you said some good things on TV about some of the things. Some of it wasn't totally new. Everybody wanted to talk about how Dak's interceptions were going to be down this season. Well, he ends up throwing 3 tonight. And, to me, Stretch, I want to get your take on this, but knowing after losing the back-to-back playoff games and then sort of thinking of this as a measuring stick type game, this was a real embarrassment to go out there and lose 42-10 in Santa Clara at their place. And yeah, it's 3-2. It's not like they're out of the playoffs or anything, but from a credibility standpoint, man, I think Mike McCarthy takes a huge hit here, and that kind of performance makes you wonder even if he's the guy moving forward. I'm not saying they're about to fire him during the season, but I Stretch, it really gives me pause to see a team go out there in what we thought was going to be a really cool, exciting matchup and fall that flat on their face. I think if they're not embarrassed, then something's wrong.
Well, I mean, let me ask you, you've been around here long enough. You've been around this organization long enough. You've been around Mr. Jones long enough. Are you saying that you think it's out of the question that he might, pull the trigger in this situation? Is that your kind of your stance?
There were moments where it did look like they quit. I mean, in that game, but no, right now, I don't think he wants to do something like that. But I'm just saying, when I see a performance like that, I start to think, hey, unless there's some kind of around or they win a couple of games and make it to an NFC title game, which would be the first time in 28, 29 years. I just kind of feel like this guy's time is numbered. And I just thought this was about as you and I've seen a lot. You've coached for the Cowboys. You remember those 90s teams. You remember Switzer, the whole thing. That's as given what was kind of on the line and what we thought we were about to watch, that's as poor a performance as I can remember in a long time.
Well, I'm asking you, and I'm saying it because I don't think you're that far off base. I believe Jerry could absolutely, he's one of those guys that if something gets in his mind, and I'm not saying that he's going to, but it's this type of performance that would lead you to think that, I don't think he would be afraid in 1 second to make a move here. And I'm not advocating that. I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever seen a Cowboy team go out and just get their ass whipped. Go out there and in every phase get your ass whipped. And when I'm saying that, I'm telling you, taking out back and just basically just said, you know what, you're not where we are, and we're going to show you. And I think it's embarrassing. I'm sure it's embarrassing to Jerry. I'm sure it's embarrassing to this organization, because I think they believe they closed the gap with what they did on free agency this year, and feeling like this was the measuring stick. And when you talk about the quarterback, this quarterback needed some sort of a signature win. He needed to go and perform well in a game where he had every opportunity to do that. And it's not what happened. When you think about, and we can sit here and again, we can grade the defense, and I got no problem doing that. But when they're on the field the entire first half, and I'm talking about defensively, because 6 of your 7 possessions, one of them was a 1 and out, and the ball got punched from Pollard behind. The other 5 were 3 and out, and they had no answers, 0 answers. The one thing they did do in the one possession that they scored on was they ran Turpin in motion. The motion guy followed him. He knew he had man coverage. He sprinted to the corner, and Dak threw a good ball, and it was a well-designed play. Other than that, offensively, I saw nothing that would lead you to believe that this team has any chance of getting to the NFC Championship game. And there's a lot of football to be played. But when you think about the overall scheme, other than Tyron, and Tyron's a hell of a player, Zach Martin's a hell of a player, I thought they pass protected pretty well versus a team that can really get after the quarterback. But other than that, I saw a team, absolutely quit. And I'm saying that because I saw CeeDee Lamb he looked like he didn't want it. Pollard looked like he turned it down, almost running with horse blinders on, almost scared to hit it up in there. He was not running with the same sense of urgency that McCaffrey was. And so I think when you see that and you're honest with yourself about looking at your football team, which I'm sure Jerry is going to do, and you see an offense that is absolutely, they got their ass shellacked. There's no other way to put it other than that. And so I think it lends to a lot of people asking questions. We've heard all about this, McCarthy's Texas coast and getting Dak in a rhythm and giving him some throws that are easier throws and some throws that were dumbed down throws. Hey, throw all that crap out. They got their ass whipped. And so, how they respond to this is going to be very interesting, because I got news for you. If you think that Kellen Moore wasn't taking his time to rest up and recover for the weekend, the Chargers are off this weekend. They play on Monday night, and he's not going to have a chip on his shoulder. Partner, you better buckle it up and get ready, because you got to go right back out to SoFi a week from tomorrow, and you got to try to play. And if this team shows the same gas in their Shiva-getter that they just showed going to Santa Clara, it could get ugly in a real hurry around here.
Yeah, and so they'll go back to California and try this thing. It is our stretch plays segment. Brock Purdy stretch goes I mean, that's kind of maddening too, to watch a guy working the ball downfield. You can say, well, better coaching, better play design. That's probably all true, but he does throw a beautiful ball. He looks very comfortable. He doesn't make mistakes. He finally throw a? I mean, I'm just trying to think what one fumble down there, 17 of 24, had 4 touchdown passes and 252 yards. That's a 144.4 quarterback rating. And with what Dak is making and what their expectations for him, I mean, it's a stark contrast. It's kind of unbelievable. Now, Stretch, I think people would like to hear from you on. I didn't want to go like, in a blowout 42-10. You don't want to go position by position, but Kittle gets loose, and he had not really been finding the end zone this year. He got 3 touchdown passes. Now, I saw one of them where it looked like Donovan just kind of got lost back there, didn't really even see the ball come in. But when you kind of looked at those different passes to the tight end, what was happening to the Cowboys, and why were they able to get so wide open on those throws to Kittle?
Well, I mean, again, when you're running deep crossers, when you're able to release and you're able to get vertical, I mean, they run the double reverse and are able to hit him. I mean, that those kind of things can happen. I think what concerns me more than anything is that they really got out schemed, and I'm not sure that I've said this about a Dan Quinn coach team where I felt like truly, as you look at the game, and then you're going to look at this film and you're going to say schematically that they were out schemed, and they were out schemed. That's really all you can say about that. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, this player, we're going to pin it on him. I mean, I thought Gilmore did not have his best game. Bland went out. He got dinged and went out. Lewis got dinged and went out. You got, you had, I believe it was Wilson got rolled on. His ankle got rolled on. And then we had Van Der Esch, he stuck his neck up in there. So again, I'm saying that when you're losing guys like that, it's very difficult for the guy who hasn't taken those reps all week to come in there and be able to do that. I'm not making any excuses here. This team, literally, I've never said this, and it pains me to say it. Across the board, this team is an F. F coaching, F in how they came out, prepared, ready to play, F offensively, F defensively. I mean, just it's incredible for me to say that, but there's nothing I can point to, again, other than I think Tyron Smith played an okay football game, but to his standards, I don't know that I could give him even any more than what would feel like would be a C or a D. But everybody else, when you look at the football team, was not ready to play. They were not. And again, I love Stephon Gilmore. He played really poorly. I mean, really poorly. And so across the board, it pains me to say it, but as bad an effort as it was, as bad as it looked and as it smelled, I don't think, and I'm going to go back to your comment. I mean, I don't think that it would be far off for Jerry to really get him a good case of the red ass after getting embarrassed and say, you know what, I'm not sure we're headed in the right direction here. And if you're honest with yourself, when you think about the play of the quarterback, and again, I go by my own point of reference here, and pardon me if I'm going to go a little long here, but I'm going to share something that I think needs to be shared, and that's it. When I first got into the league, there's a guy named Mike Giddings, and he used to grade every player in the NFL, and you could buy his service. And he graded everybody in the NFL. It's really amazing what he did. But he always finished his grade by either giving you an arrow up, a flat, or an arrow down, a declining player, or a player that was just what you were wanting to see, and that's what you got, or the arrow was going up where you could say, okay, he's playing better, he looks better. This quarterback is a declining player, and that's the bottom line. And he's been declining. And so when the ball is not, he's never been accurate, but when that hasn't gotten better and it doesn't feel any better right now, I mean, he is a declining player. And I also know that you can't get yourself in a situation where you're stumbling around in the quarterback wilderness. So I don't have an answer for you as to what they're going to do. But I tell you one thing, I don't believe it was Jason Garrett. I don't believe it was Kellen Moore. I don't believe it's Mike McCarthy. I believe the common denominator in this equation is a quarterback who, quite frankly, can just function in a good offense if he's got some run game around him and he can play action off of it. Can you ever put a football team squarely on his shoulders and expect him to carry him? And the answer is no. And I believe you could with Tony Romo. I believe you could with Troy Aikman. And I believe you could with Roger Staubach. And unfortunately, that's the measuring stick in this town for quarterbacks.
Yeah, we'll throw Danny in there too with his 3 straight NFC title games. Certainly right now, Dak, boy, looked kind of lost after that one and said that that's about as humbling an experience as he's ever had on the football field. Stretch, good work tonight, both on TV and on the Doomsday podcast. In fact, I've just written something on my legal pad, drew a little something, and it's an arrow pointing up for you. All right, just something
All right. Yeah. Well, Mosley, I appreciate that, and I'm gonna draw you a little something, and we're gonna play a little story time with Stretch here, and that's the arrow going up, and that's for a guy that's kind of got his hat like that, and he's working the flat bill. There it is, flat bill with the arrow going up. That's our producer Steven Simcox. He's got the flat bill working, and he's got the arrow going up. So there you have it.
Well, he just turned 31. I think you can only rock the flat bill till about 35, and then you got to start breaking that thing in. There's still a few 50-year out there that'll try flat bill, and it does not work. Stretch, appreciate it. You can imagine me. I go watch a non-competitive, my alma mater, the Bears, against the Red Raiders, and then I watch a non-competitive Cowboys team. I mean, it's been a back-to-back, some bad football I've witnessed. The young Simcox had to watch a kind of a rough TCU team, his alma mater. So it's been a rough weekend of football watching. And then Stretch, your alma mater played a lot better, way more competitive, but did take one on the chin to the Sooners. All right, I appreciate you, buddy, and again, really enjoyed your TV work tonight. Very nice sport coat, and appreciate you joining us.
Hey, you guys have a good evening, Mosley, and don't be afraid to show us that mop next time. You got your Camp Ozark shampoo working, and I can tell out back of it you look like a mutt. So don't get arrested for mopery over there in Lake Highlands. See you later, Mosley.
And there he goes. Stretch plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys scout and coach. Boy, not pulling any punches with Dak Prescott, a declining player, and kind of calling him the common denominator in some of the struggles. Although, my gosh, they won a lot of games. But, wow, this is a rough night for Cowboys fans. But that is Stretch plays. All right, there it was. Ed, F's all across the board. All right, F's for the coaches.
He probably give us an F too.
No, I told him his arrow was pointing upward. I think ours is, but the teams after tonight seems to be pointing the wrong direction. And I I don't know. I'll bounce this off of you because it was interesting what I just heard you say about Dak. It's really, and again, you're obviously someone who's said up extremely positive things about Dak over the years, but even opening the door and thinking down the road on what kind of option Trey Lance could be, Stretch went as far to call Dak a quote declining player. He is 30 years old. Obviously, there's a long way to go in this season. So maybe that's too harsh, but it's that was the way he classified him.
I don't know if I guess it's fair to say that in the sense, at least athletically, that he's not the runner that he was, early in his career, and maybe losing that aspect of his game, which made him unique, now makes him closer to ordinary. That's certainly a possibility. I mean, you see, he doesn't move all that well anymore since suffering that, horrific injury 3 years ago that required, his ankle be rebuilt, and ended his season prematurely after 5 games. I'm not sure he's been that player again since. And it's that, and the fact that they're spending $40 million and they need him in the lineup. But I think I don't want to overreact to one game, but really, like I said, it's been 5 games where we haven't seen anything impressive with this offense. And, Jerry and Steven, in training camp, we're talking about, Dak Prescott's going to get an extension. It's almost an automatic foregone conclusion, and then it didn't happen. And then they started to explain, well, we're just going to wait. Well, there's a reason they haven't done it. They planned to do it. They didn't do it. One of the things they did do is go out and get a quarterback who was viewed at one point as a potential franchise quarterback, a young quarterback who needs to be developed. And that's what I'm talking about, being a new part of this complicated equation with Dak Prescott. Why have they, if they have so much belief in him going forward, why have they not done what they plan to do and sign him? Why is that? Is it because of games like this, in moments like this? I don't know. They haven't explained it.
Yeah.
So when they say they're going to do something, then they change their mind abruptly, and it's something of this magnitude, and they don't explain it. Then yeah, I get suspicious. You think Dak liked them trading for a young quarterback who was the 3rd pick in a draft?
No.
Without informing him in advance? I doubt he loves that. And we saw instances in previous administrations with Jason Garrett and Tony Romo where Jerry made them play out their final year of their contracts because he thought it would create the kind of intensity and desperation that would lead to wins, and it did sometimes. Maybe that's what he was trying to duplicate here. I don't know.
Well, I think Dak, that injury you described, which for some people would screw up their futures and their contract, ended up being extremely beneficial to him, and it gave him even more leverage over the Cowboys. And
that's the thing. Like he's always had all the leverage. Like Romo always had all the leverage because the Cowboys never had another reasonable option. And maybe, I know right now you wouldn't say Trey Lance is a reasonable option, but I mean, it's not to say he couldn't be. It's not to say he couldn't be. And what are my choices? Paying Dak $50 million and committing to him for another 3 or 4 years? I mean, I know the Cowboys are tired of being beaten in these negotiations by their quarterback. And so that had to be part of the motivation to go get Trey Lance. And so Dak's got to play well, and Dak's got to win like never before.
Yeah.
And he still could. It could still happen.
But honestly, around here, winning is just getting to the playoffs, and I'm not even sure he has to win a playoff game. I mean, I'm not certain that it would, even if he plays reasonably well, he'll be the quarterback of the future. But your point is well taken in that Trey Lance's presence at least creates some form of a developmental player who has what Jerry desires. Huge pedigree, was at one point thought enough of to trade all these first round picks to go get. Like, that's how much. But as somebody said on Twitter, there was a lot of good stuff flying around tonight. I think it was Kevin Clark, who now works for ESPN, was like, it's just kind of amazing to think that this organization can seemingly be so much more talented after committing. What did they trade? 3 first rounders to get Trey Lance. And yet when you look at their defense and their offense and everybody involved, it seemed like tonight that the Cowboys didn't even belong on the same field as San Francisco. It is a strange thing. And it seemed like they got out coached. And a lot of times I think Dan Quinn's been so good here that, and that's probably something we should mention, is that, as you said, Micah, who we talk so much about for good reason, he's a great player. But like tonight, I think it was like they just were kind of doing anything they wanted. He'd line up one place, then he'd go, and sometimes they were just all standing up, and nothing worked. Like, he never really put any. Yeah,
I mean, it's not often that Dan Quinn and the defense is part of the reason you lose rather than win. Oftentimes they're the only reason you win, as has been the case most of this season. And this offense can't win without the support of takeaways and short fields and defensive scores. And so, I mean, you give Dan Quinn more of a pass than you do Mike McCarthy in this situation.
You know, it's kind of what I talked a little bit about with Stretch, Romo, Troy, Danny. I mean, you kind of go back. They all could put a team on their shoulders when they had to. And it's not like Romo the whole time had great defenses or even great offensive lines. And as much maligned as he was at times, he could go get you a win. And like tonight, they needed get involved in a track meet type thing, and it didn't happen. And it didn't even come close to happening.
They needed to respond. McCarthy won the coin toss. He's won the coin toss every week. The last 2 weeks, he's taken the ball because he wants to go down and score and make the opposing team play from behind against Dallas's defense and create pass rush and havoc and indecision and mistakes. And tonight he did the opposite, and he deferred, and the 49ers went down and scored right away, and the Cowboys played the entire game from behind. They have not won a game yet unless they've led from start to finish. In all 3 of their wins, they have never been behind. The 49ers have been behind all season for 1 minute and 45 seconds. That's how dominant they've been. But the Cowboys have shown no ability to respond to it. They didn't respond to the Cardinals getting behind the Cardinals, and they didn't respond tonight ever.
Yeah. And Greenlaw and Warner, as you mentioned, they just threw them all around the yard. They bullied them like crazy. The defensive line was great. Gibson, who, by the way, I kind of love it. He said, I peeked, I usually don't pay attention to those little player when they say where they're from. And he said, Gibson, Dallas Kimball. I said, hey, there's our guy. There's our guy. He's a veteran now, like 32 years old or 33 years old, playing well. All right, Ed, last thing. You mentioned it. Now, here comes the Chargers. Cowboys will be out there. There was a time when Parcells just chose to stay out there between, I don't know, it was like a 49ers and when the Raiders were out there. Cowboys, I guess, will come on home and do their thing. But, I mean, this is another high-powered offense, another interesting matchup where you have people, as you mentioned, that have maybe want to send a message. This is, I know what you're saying. I like your stat that Mike seems to be good after a loss, but I just don't see any scenario where anybody could feel good about anything after that 42-10, the side of that.
I think they got to go prove themselves all over again. They got to prove to the country that just watched them tonight get beat by 32 points and never respond and subject themselves to accusations of quitting and people wondering just how legitimate they are, given that, the 49ers had won as many games as the Cowboys' previous opponents combined. Like, you beat a bunch of bad teams handily. You lost to a bad team too. But then you play, one of the teams that's a class of the conference, and you talk about how, you're going to measure yourselves against them and you come up this short. I think they're going to be mad next week. I think they'll be angry. And I don't know. I think they have more talent than the Chargers. I don't know. Herbert broke a finger in his non-passing hand. So I don't know what, his game status will be. They lost Mike Williams, one of their best receivers, to an ACL injury a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of motivation, I think, beyond, hey, we want to beat Kellen Moore, and Mike McCarthy wants to prove that was the right decision to make him the play caller and get rid of Kellen Moore. I think the Cowboys are going to be determined to prove to the country that they're better than they were the last time they saw them, which was only 7 nights before.
All right, Ed, and even 42-10, the networks, if they could guarantee the Cowboys for the next 5 primetime slots, they would take them, right?
Of course.
Always. Ed, safe travels. Go by that Santa Clara University and check that out. We've got friends out there. I think you would love that campus. Get a cup of coffee in the morning. Great to be with you. We miss our guy, Frito. We appreciate Steven Simcox from ESPN Central Texas and filling in tonight, doing a wonderful job from far north Dallas. And Ed, they're in Santa Clara. We're saying good night to you, and we will see you next Monday night. Good night, everybody.
Vanguard is working hard to balance opportunity and risk for investors in this time of volatile yields. We know financial advisors are working hard to do the same. Visit Vanguard.com/fixed income today. Important information. All investing is subject to risk, including the possible loss of the money you invest. Bond funds are subject to the risk that an issuer will fail to make payments on time, and that bond prices will decline because of rising interest rates or negative perceptions of an issuer's ability to make payments. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, Distributor.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.